Hello, hello, hello. Can everybody find a seat, please? We'll get this thing going. Please find yourself a seat. Right, welcome to our first launch of this book. Kheng Soon, are you ready? All right, over to you, Kheng Soon. Let's go.
Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. The book is unusual, not a normal book, and of course, therefore, this book launch is also not normal. Usually in a book launch, you will have somebody who will introduce the author, right? But I'm just going to introduce myself, okay? And also introduce the panel, right? And so we have here on my left, right, so he's leftist, Yeoh Lam Keong, who is an economist. He used to be chief economist in GIC, so he knows a lot about where our reserves have gone. Then you have Lai Chee Kien, who is an architect, a historian, and a conservation architect who knows a lot about the architecture in Southeast Asia. There's Luke, a kind of social activist, I'm not very sure. But he represents, I chose him because he represents a new generation of young people who are entrepreneurial. They're looking at new possibilities and so on. And of course, all the new possibilities are outside of Singapore. Okay, so the purpose of this book launch is not just to talk about the book, but to discuss the issues which the book identifies. Basically, I have to say right from the beginning, why did I do this? Okay. First of all, I must say that I'm very thankful to Friday Conversations, which we started 2 years ago, with people like Alfred. Who else? I can't see anybody else. Alex Tan. Who else? Anyway, so they are very inspirational in the support of this project, and of course, Lee came on, right? The guy who makes it all happen. Yeah. So the book will be sold at $30. The idea is that you will pay for the printing costs because it's all color, right? So the printing cost is usually extra high. Yeah. And with the help of Mr. Fong who is a publisher and who did this actually out of the bottom of his heart. Okay. So why did I do this? I'm terribly concerned about the future of Singapore. I have spent six decades, right, as an activist and as an architect. So I saw Singapore's development from its early days, right? I left school in 1957, just after the PAP was formed, and Singapore became a kind of self-governing state after the British granted it self-governing status. 1959, PAP became the political party in power. So I've seen the whole thing, right? And I'm very concerned that in the beginning, I think we did very well, and I think Lam Keong will talk about how in the beginning we had a stakeholder capitalism, but it has drifted more and more towards shareholder capitalism. Okay, the difference is that shareholder capitalism rewards the shareholder only, And the government is the biggest shareholder because it owns 80% of all the land in Singapore. So every time you buy an HDB flat, you are actually putting money into the state coffers. Okay? Stakeholder capitalism means not only shareholder gets benefit, but the stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? The stakeholders are the people of Singapore, the environment, the institutions that make this place work properly. So the stakeholder capitalism, the crisis of stakeholder capitalism came about in the event, rather recent event, where NTUC Income was going to be sold to a big shareholder capitalist group, Allianz or whatever. And I think, fortunately, because of a lot of reaction from the public as well as from the people within the ruling class, there were second thoughts, and that whole thing was scuttled. So this is the crisis in the situation. It's symptomatic of a crisis. So the future of Singapore is going to be a big question. Right now we have Trump coming to power. It's now going to kind of America as number one, the Make America Great Again. Does it mean that all the rest of the world is going to be put aside, right? In a sense it's good, but in a different sense it's bad. Because the Singapore economy depends entirely on the supply chain, right? Which is tied to the Euro-American order. And in the book, basically, I'm arguing that we must not rely entirely on the supply chain, but develop an eco-regional economy with our neighbours. So this is something which we need to discuss and develop better thinking, especially in the light of the Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone. Okay, and in fact, I would just like to tell you that I'm in the process of setting up a design research group called SPACE, SPACE, consisting of the Institute of Architects and all the architectural schools in NUS, in SUTD, and in the Singapore Polytechnic. Okay, and we are setting up also a counter group in Johor, so that the two groups can discuss and work together, right? So this is a kind of initiative that we need to do as citizens. Okay, it will hopefully generate some good ideas, which if government thinks is good, take it. If government thinks it's lousy, throw it. It doesn't matter. But the important thing is that in the process of looking at this, of the master plan of the whole SEZ, all the participants, and I hope many of you will also join in the discussions, right? We will be learning a lot about how to do this joint venture between Singapore and Malaysia. Okay, so I would like to invite, first of all, to ask Lam Keong to talk about what are your reactions when you read the book from an economist point of view. And then after that, the others will come in. Chee Kien will talk about the issue of identity, right? We have lost our identity because we became a global city, and so all our young people all look west. They forgot to be what we are. So that's one issue. And then and Luke there will talk about how young people can play a big role in the future. Okay? And then after that, I will open it to the house, and let's have a lot of fun asking a lot of questions. Thank you very much. Yours.
Thanks very much, Kheng Soon. I've been a long time follower and apprentice of Kheng Soon's in many sense, intellectually, in terms of policy discussion, and he's guided me in very, many ways. As an intellectual, as an economist, political economist, even as an aesthetic on the art side, is mentored me.
So he's by the way also a fantastic artist. He's a great painter.
Anyway, so he's opened my eyes to the deeper theoretical realities behind what I thought I knew. I'd like to share with you my reactions to his book as an economist. I was working in GIC for 25 years and 10 years as its chief economist, and got to see a lot of the rest of the world, the rest of economic policy, and was trained in evaluating critically all the economic policies that came before me, presented as investment opportunities by the rest of the world. So I had to be ended up reasonably critical about it. My reaction to Kheng Soon's work is I was, first of all, just fascinated by the entire range and complexity of his thought. But zooming in on the economic aspect of the thought, the part that most gripped me was his arguments for our return to our original stakeholder economy and to junk the foreign neoliberal ideology, unquote. I think, having looked long and hard at many economic regimes around the world and in Singapore, I couldn't agree with this idea most. Let me explain to you what I think I understand by this, which may not be so apparent from just its titles and its jargon. Okay, to me, what is a stakeholder economy? What is, more importantly, a modern stakeholder economy today as we see it, as it's practicable in the world, as it's successful in the world? To me, the biggest example of a successful modern stakeholder economy is the economy of Germany. Okay, I say the economy of Germany because not many people know that Germany is probably the most successful and competitive, high value added, high tech exporter in the world, bar none. Okay, except of course, America is leading in a few narrow fields, high tech, but if you take the entire spectrum of manufacturing technology and all its high tech applications, there is no stronger, broader, deeper economy than Germany at the moment. And that includes China. It trumps China, trumps America. It is, in fact, as they used to say, über alles, right? So it has built itself up from this position since the end of the Second World War. Over the last 60 years, gradually by implementing a very, very serious system of stakeholder economy. Now, what to me is, first of all, the most general description of a stakeholder economy is an economy where both the government and, importantly, the corporate sector, the private companies of that country, work efficiently and together to create the best value for all its citizens within the country and all its customers of that country. Okay, so I would say that there are three important characteristics of a stakeholder economy. First, I'll start with the government sector, an intelligent state intervention in society, both in social policy intervention, but as equally importantly in industrial policy intervention. So the government is a key player in creating the environment for, conditions for perpetuating the success of the stakeholder economy in the way that it creates the conditions for optimal partnership with the corporate sector. Okay, so the first important thing to notice is that it's not as a case where many neoliberal economists, including America today, argue that minimize government, get government out of the way. That is completely mistaken in my experience in looking at all these successful economies. And not just Germany, you look at the whole of Scandinavia, you look at the Netherlands, look at the successful Northern European economies, including the successfully industrial part of Italy. All these countries share the same characteristic. The government, first of all, takes responsibility for orchestrating the rules of the game and supporting the corporate sector and society. All right. So intelligent intervention both in social and industrial policy. And then we come to the corporate sector itself, and this is where most people don't really understand what a real stakeholder economy involves. It's not just the government, which many of the neoliberals will say, the government cannot create a successful socialist state because it's inefficient. No, the corporate sector itself is vitally important because it is extremely efficient. In the long run, even more efficient than the shareholder economy. Okay, and what does a company, a stakeholder-oriented company, look like? First and foremost, we must know what is most important for the company to maximize. What does the company really look to achieve as its mission and objectives? And this can be generalized. Most companies in Germany are like this, successful ones. First and foremost is the customer. It looks to give value to and take care of its customers. Secondly, it looks to take care of its staff and its business partners, including all its suppliers, including all its financial partners. It considers itself part of that community as well. Thirdly, it looks to benefit the community that it is located in. Most of the successful companies in Germany, and there are many of them, there are thousands of what you call the Mittelstand, the middle-sized companies up to 1,000 employees, are located not just in the big cities, but in all the various smaller states in the German Republic itself. And they have taken it upon themselves over generations to be the sponsors and benefit of their communities in education, in welfare, in culture, in sports. And they are looked up to by members of the community as providing employment and providing resources. And unlike the reception that, for example, Jeff Bezos will get if he walks down New York, these people are respected members of their communities. And they feel a deep duty and obligation to the communities to look after their welfare over generations. So that is another example of how the community is a key stakeholder for these companies. And finally, of course, there are the shareholders. They don't count for nothing, they are important, and they are not maximizing profits. They are maximizing the ability for the shareholders to continue to support the company in the long term. They're interested in the long-term survival of this enterprise that creates so much benefit to everybody. The survival of this enterprise, the sustainable survival, is their longest term goal. Okay, other characteristics are, given this, they don't hire and fire short term. You never see them cutting staff like Amazon does, short and long term, to balance the books for the next profits release for the next 2 quarters. They would rather close than do this sort of thing, right? They are looking for the long-term sustainability and therefore they invest in it, in technology, in their people, over the long term. Over years, they're looking at 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Okay? As a result, interestingly, you find relatively little income inequality in these companies. The ratio typically of the shop floor worker's wage to the CEO's wage in these companies is 50 to 80 times, compared to 200 to 400 times in an American shareholder-oriented company, typically listed companies, right? So you can see they have almost a tenth, of the inequality that you see in these companies. And this reflects their values. And this reassures their stakeholders that their stakeholders are the one that's important in the long run, not management. This is the key of these companies. Compare this to a shareholder-oriented company, most of which you see listed on US, UK stock exchanges, and unfortunately increasingly so in Singapore, right? You see maximization of profits. You see sacrificing of employment short-term to boost up near-term profitability. You see often only short-term investments, not long-term investments, and you see extreme inequality between management and top management and shop floor, who are actually seen as expendable digits. So this, if you like, is the engine room of the economy, the two very different engine rooms that power the German economy and the US or the UK economy, right? And we are at a point where we have to decide in Singapore which ones we would like to model our economy after. Finally, one last difference is, of course, these companies engage in responsible collective bargaining practices with the government of the day. That means to say, they recognize that they collectively need to behave responsibly so that the country as a whole is competitive, and they maintain their long-term goals. So they cooperate actively with the authorities in this way. Okay. So they support and the champions of collective bargaining. They don't oppose unions. They see the strength in the unions as necessary to maintain their long-term survival, right? As opposed to, say, the anti-union kind of activities you see both in the US and UK. They want to diminish the power of the unions. They want to destroy the collective bargaining process. They are against any kind of unionization in their own companies because they will not be able to do their short-term profit maximizing practices. Would hinder them at the individual company level. So they cannot see beyond the individual company interests to the collective corporate interests. So the final point I would like to say is that, believe it or not, Singapore was once a stakeholder economy when the PAP government first came into power, and for its first 20 years, I would say, right up to, I would imagine, the mid-80s, Singapore was very much a stakeholder-oriented economy. There was strong, intelligent industrial policy. We did many things that nobody else dared to do. We created export-oriented industrialization. We pioneered institutions like GIC, like a new form of macroeconomic management in the MAS. We created the Jurong Town Corporation that out of a swamp created full employment. And so we did many things with intelligent state intervention. We actually bought up and owned as a government 80% of the land in Singapore. So this was effectively a huge land reform that gives the Singapore public as a whole ownership of the land in Singapore, something that many other capitalist countries could have never have done, right? Without a revolution. So also, if you look at our corporate sector then, and we gave rise to several very successful government-linked corporations that had a strong ethos of stakeholder orientation. So everything from DBS to SIA to Keppel to Sembawang to all those successful companies that at one time were masters of their field and very sustainable. And that, of course, includes NTUC Income. Okay, so people like Tan Kin Lian and Tan Swee Chie, they developed and pioneered and grew the company from a few $100 million to over $40 billion of net asset value. So these are, and with a very strong orientation towards serving the public, serving their stakeholders, not just serving their shareholders, but first and foremost, serving their policy owners, right? Insurance policy owners, health insurance policy owners, and I think Mr. Tan has remained faithful to that ethos to this day, and so both Mr. Tans, right? So this is an example of our heritage, as a stakeholder-oriented company, and a very successful one. This is the strongest, most successful period of growth that Singapore has ever seen, right? And people's welfare, livelihood and welfare increased tremendously. And this was in partnership with the government who upheld these values, both in terms of benefiting the people. This is when they created HDB, which is finest and remains the finest public housing system in the world today, bar none. Nothing in Scandinavia approaches this. Nothing anywhere else the rest of the world approaches this. Okay, so we created these institutions of public good, both in social policy and industrial policy, in a way that had never seen before. Why? Because these were the principles. These were the stakeholders we were committed to, both as a government and as a corporate sector. All those unsung heroes in the corporate sector. Tan Swee Chair, Tan Kin Lian,
Kien is here.
Oh, Kien is here.
Kien, please stand up.
Please give him a hand. George Bogas, all those, Joe Pillay, all these heroes of our corporate sector doing their part in this way, right? How many of them remain? Look around you, look at Temasek today, right? Look where the companies are today, look at the share price today. Most of them continuous decline for 10 years, right? Look at their shift from essentially stakeholder to shareholder-oriented profit maximization, and see where that has got us. So we're at a point where we need to decide, are we going to follow this modern stakeholder-oriented economy? Are we going to model ourselves after a country, our own version of Germany, our own version of Switzerland, our own version of the Netherlands? Or are we going to follow the US economy to the political hell that it is in today, right? The farcical political hell that it finds, and social hell, and divided society, and impoverished bottom 50% of the population with very little financial hopes that it finds itself in today. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
I just want to add a couple of points. First of all, about Germany. The German economy grew tremendously because people did not buy houses. They rented houses. That was a big difference. But in the last 20 years, it has drifted into ownership of housing. And once you own housing, your capital is locked into the property. Okay, so this is one big issue. The second point I want to highlight is about the how did the shareholder economy take root in Singapore. Okay, I have conjectured. I have no evidence, but I've spoken to people who were in Harvard University in 1968 when Lee Kuan Yew went and spent 3 months there. He spent a whole semester in Harvard, and that's where he made very good friends with Kissinger and quite a number of the top strategic thinkers in America. And he became, in my view, their man in Asia. Okay? Now, what is the implication of this? And in the book also I mentioned about the rise of neoliberalism, right? Through the influence of Milton Friedman, who is professor of economics at Chicago University. And Milton Friedman had tremendous influence over the Republican Party in America, right? And that is where the idea that minimum government, maximize freedom of investor, shareholder interest and so on began. I suspect that when Lee Kuan Yew came back from after 68, which is interesting because by the time he made a point, he made a speech that 1968, the PAP broke the back of the housing problem, okay? And that because 65 we left Malaysia, right? We had to become a global city because we have no more hinterland, right? Therefore, we have to be totally locked into the Euro-American economic order, which is the new liberal order, okay? So now this is the situation we are in. I think we need to think very deeply about how the land owning capability of the government, because unlike any other non-communist country, Singapore is the only non-communist country whose government owns 80% of all the land. Only Cuba, China, and a few of the, because of the socialist ideology, they confiscated the land, right? But in Singapore, the government is the only sort of free world democratic government that owns the majority of the land. And this is very crucial because once you own the land, it becomes a tremendous asset to gain profits into the state coffers, which is a good thing because it meant that you know the figures, right? The sovereign wealth fund of Singapore is in the trillions, right? But it has now left a legacy in which how are we going to transform from this shareholder economy, which has now engaged almost the entire population. 90% of Singaporeans own their HDB flat, which is the cost is an aggregate of the building cost plus the land cost. Building cost is 1/3, land cost is 2/3, right? So when you buy a flat for X thousands of dollars, right? 1/3 is building cost, 2/3 is the land cost, and the land cost you pay goes into the state coffers. And for young people, they have to spend the next 20 to 30 years of their life, affordably of course, but because they have to spend so much of their income to pay for the mortgage, they dare not try anything that is outside the box. They dare not innovate, they dare not try various things. The only chance, I think, for Singapore now is the SEZ Johor. And a lot of young people will have to go to Johor because that is the only free space left. Let's hope that it's not going to be taken over by real estate developers. Okay? It has to become an enterprise zone for young people to create. So these are the situations we are in, right? So I'm in the process of setting up a design research group with all the universities, NUS, SUTD, and Singapore Poly, the architectural schools, to form a design research group, right? To study what are the possibilities, suggest ideas, and also to collaborate with an equivalent Malaysian counterpart. So we learn from each other. And that is how we will begin to think about a possible future, right? Because the future in Singapore is locked into the financial model. It cannot get out. The government is locked into it, the private sector, the people are also locked into it. So this is a double trap. Over to you.
Thanks, Vincent. I will continue with some of the threads that have been spun in this dialogue. And we can begin with the global city. So the two words that comprise this term, global and city, suggests, of course, we really talked about the, looking towards the world as a way to sort of seek certain forms of identity, connections, economic or otherwise. And then the other term, city, suggests that urbanization is the thrust, right, to modernity, to a better economic status, which is something that most countries were converting their towns, right, into cities and so on and so forth. So the global city, as an idea, right, came about, I think, about 7 years after Singapore got independence, around 1972, when the then Foreign Minister and SG Govt proposed the idea of a global city. And of course, we can understand it historically that because of the so-called loss of hinterland, right, the prolonged trysts with Indonesia, and then of course separation from Malaysia, that Singapore had to sort of leapfrog, so-called leapfrog over the region, right, and then to make connections with the world networks. Right. So this then means that for the period of time that we have been looking at this idea of the global city, that the identities are also connected with the ideas of the global city, to understand the world as it is and so on and so forth. So in the book, right, Kheng Soon invited me to say something about this, and I firmly believe that first of all, I think we need to rethink about the idea of the global city, and if we are to think about our identities going forward, that there should be, to put it simply, 3 levels of identity. Right? So if you think about identity as a kind of a sphere, right, with a person in the middle, then of course you have the immediate surrounding, right, your family, your home, and all that. The first level can kind of roughly be gauged in terms of Singapore, right, as a whole. So knowing the histories of Singapore, something very local, I think it's something that we need to pursue very diligently now, right? To understand what is the history of this place. The history of this place, I think, has been written, but I think it has also been written in relation to the developmental histories of Singapore, the global city, and so on and so forth. So that is the first sphere, if you will, first part of that sphere, which is closest to us, which is the personal identities, right? Knowing Singapore much better. Then the second level, or second outer sort of a level, would be the region, right? So if in the global city, this has been overlooked in part because of the sort of developmental histories and so on and so forth. So understanding this second level of reconnecting much deeper with the region is something that is quite important. Right? Sorry. In 1967, of course, there is the formation of ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, beginning with 6, and then now we have 11. I have some problems with the term ASEAN, because I think then it means that you are couching it in terms it has become a shorthand, right? So a lot of people use it as shorthand. But if you think about Southeast Asia, of course, it has a much longer history prior to 1967, when that association was formed mainly for politics, for business, and sometimes, right, if they can afford it, some aspects of culture, right? So cultural connections and so on and so forth. The culture is not very high on the agenda of ASEAN. But if you then look back at the histories of Southeast Asia, as opposed to ASEAN, there's a lot to offer us and a lot of things that we can understand reflexively, right? Looking at and understanding neighboring countries, and then reflexively understanding ourselves. So my proposal, right, for more enlightened kind of Singaporean citizen in this future is a person who can sort of go through these different spheres as easily as one understands the sort of global sphere. So let me return to some examples, right, in Singapore, how we can better sort of understand the histories. I often ask my students, do you know why there are so many chukangs in Singapore? Right? You have Lim Chu Kang, Chua Chu Kang, Yeoh Chu Kang. There used to be Chan Chu Kang, right? Tan Chu Kang, and believe it or not, there was a Hua Chu Kang. So it's now, sort of inundated because of MacRitchie Reservoir. There was a Hua Chu Kang. So the Chu Kang was a system that was also connected with the Sultan of Johor, right? Because they signed, Singapore, the Sultan signed 2 treaties, and before the British were able to fully take hold of the whole island, he signed further treaties, like Kangchu treaties with overseas Chinese, right, predominantly Teochew, to set up watersheds for the planting of pepper and gambia, right? So each of the Kangchus, right, the person in charge of a chukang, would have jurisdiction, right? The Sultan would send him some guards, right? So he has some policemen, and then there are certain structures that are set up. So in terms of a structure, the chukang is a kind of a spatial structure that is in the north of Singapore, right? And of course the Kangchu, right? The surname of the surname of the Kangchu would then be ascribed to the chukang. So you have Lim Chukang, right? You have Chua Chukang, and so on and so forth. So I think it would be interesting to sort of understand, like, Singapore's history as, first of all, the system that's set up in the northern shores, but also as a way to sort of understand ecological consequences, right? Because it was a kind of agricultural system, right, of planting pepper and gambia, and then of course it developed from there. So unfortunately, Chan Chu Kang, which is actually quite close to Nisu, and of course now most people don't understand, don't know where it is, and so on and so forth. So that's one example of just ways of understanding Singapore history, very very broadly. For me, I think this is something that every Singaporean should know. Every time they go to take the train and arrive at Chua Chu Kang, that they should know, and they should be able to tell their friends, right, overseas friends, right, why is it called Chua Chu Kang, and so on and so forth, right? And of course, this history permeates through the entire island as well. I'm of the opinion that every part of Singapore has a history, right? And also, I can also please ask everyone not to use the term Ulu anymore. To suggest this place is a remote place, and there's a Chinese term for it, and so the term Ulu has to be used in the proper context. The term Ulu has been wrongly used by the colonials, and we're sort of continuing this mistake, because for Singapore, or for the Malay Singaporeans at the time, right, Ulu is a kind of directional system. It is just upriver, right? So you have Ulu Sembawang, because it's a Sembawang river, and then there is a Hilir, right? So the part of the river that's closer to the river mouth is Hilir. The part that's further away towards the headland. That's why we have the word Penghulu, right? Penghulu. So you can only say that the place is really remote if there is a river. So there is sort of spatial ideas about that. Yeah. And then if we come to sort of even housing developments, right? So I often tell a lot of friends, right, and to say that you can't call this station between Clementi Road and Jurong King Albert Park. It is not King Albert Park, but King Albert Park. And the reason why it's so should be pronounced as King Albert Park, and instantly the funny thing is that in Chinese, it's actually correct because it's just Yabo. So Yabo. So why King Albert Park? King should be called King Albert Park. And it's because a lot of the early housing estates were developed by a Belgian developer called Credit Foncier. Right? And Credit Foncier actually were pioneers of private housing estates. So King Albert Park actually was a kind of pioneer estate, right? Because they realized that at that point in time, right, real estate was very messy. Right? You had this thing called the T-money scandal, right, where you had to pay developers, to build on land. Right? If you want to get electricity and water from the colonial government at the time, you have to seek their help, so they would charge a lot. And so what happened was Credit Foncier said, right, well, we should simplify this for you, right? We will take care of internal roads, we will provide you with sewerage, right? We will have water and electricity cable, let us take care of the colonial government's connection, and so on and so forth. So King Albert Park was formed. It was one of the first kind of private housing estates. And so it went on to create, and why King Albert Park was because it was to honor one of their kings, a Belgian king, King Albert, in the same way that they also honored Queen Astrid Park, which was also a kind of a Belgian royalty. So they went on to build a lot of places, Namli Park, Binjai Park. So this was a very important one, and they were even able to consolidate land to sell to Chongqing High School with the lake, right, as kind of a real estate. So unfortunately, this Credit Foncier closed, right, and it folded. It first folded. It was expanding very quickly in China. So in the sense, you need to know the regional history. And then of course, in 1949, the land was nationalized. So there was no more private land that could be owned, and all of these developments were taken back. And so Credit Foncier suffered. Right? So they tried to hang on. They lost China, the cities in China, but they still had Hong Kong, and they had Singapore. But subsequently, I believe it's like 1950s, it folded completely. So we have no trace of a developer who had impacts on the name, who had impacts on a kind of a form of public housing estate, and it's sort of a loss of history. So there are so many instances like this. So for example, we talked about I'm going to talk about JTC and Jurong. And again, right, if you want to talk about Jurong, we also need to link it to the Garden City kind of moniker for Singapore, because when Jurong was formed, right, Working Street promoted, and of course JTC promoted the idea of not only an industrial estate. It was to be called Jurong Garden Industrial Estate. Jurong Garden Industrial Estate. And if those of us who know what the garden city idea was from UK, right? You have Ebenezer Howard towards the end of the 19th century, right, promoting this idea of a garden city because of industrialized London primarily, and to have zones, right, separating the key area of London from satellite towns. But then, of course, you would have belts of park, right, radiating outwards from London. So in the case of Jurong, it is actually, I was trying to tell you already that this actually is a very, is one of its, the idea is one of its kind, right? The Jurong Garden Industrial Estate. And what the Jurong Garden Industrial Estate entails is not the radial system that the London kind of a garden city idea or subsequent garden cities that were promoted in the US London. It was completely different. It was, Jurong was to be gridded up. Right? So first of all, you have the heavy industries and the medium industries and the light industries progressively away from the sea, right, the rivers. But then it was also cut up so that, you know, you would, and so the idea was not zones of green. The idea was pieces of green everywhere along within Jurong itself, right? So this is the reason why even the naming of the housing estates are linked to this idea. Taman Jurong, Teban Gardens, Pandan Gardens. So the idea in itself is already to create the town which has an affinity to landscape, to gardens. Then you have the preponderance of green spaces. You have the Chinese garden, you have the Japanese garden, you have the whole Jurong Lake, Jurong Hill, and so on and so forth. So although, you know, a lot of the environment, you know, the hills were cut and so on and so forth, but the idea is actually quite a novel one. I don't think, as far as I know, you know, this is the only one in the world that has that kind of concept of a garden industrial estate, not in the way that the sort of a London kind of belts and belts of green and so on, but a different form. So I think this is quite important, at least, right, for at least, you know, architecture students or planning students to understand, but also to then able to say what Jurong was, or what was the form that Jurong has taken. So it's an ongoing search. Sometimes I feel very lonely because nobody really wants to know these things. But I think it is tremendously interesting that every part of Singapore has a story. So even if you just say one of the places that are named after trees, right, like Changi, Tampines, so you can get certain narratives. So this is just Singapore, right? And what I have been teaching is about Southeast Asia, and of course then that expands manifold, right? Because you then have to look across the immediate neighbours, right? Malaysia and Indonesia, and then also other connections elsewhere. So for example, you know, you can't really know Pulau Kekong without knowing the history of the Pahang Empire. Because there was a sort of a war in Pahang, and then the sort of people retreated to Pulau Kekong and sort of set up there, right? At the end of Lim Chu Kang, there is a house over the water called a pier house. It used to belong to Howard Gresham, who was a lawyer who also settled cases for the Johor Sultan, who would travel from Johor to his house by boat, because they didn't care about immigration or something. And then Howard Gresham would also sometimes, you know, take a boat and go up. So that's just within the Singapore borders. And then you have, and you know, you probably, you know, this people of this vintage will probably have known The King and I. The story of The King and I would not have happened without the Singapore connection, because Anna was actually sent from Singapore to become, you know, nurse or whatever we call it for the.
Apparently she was living in Rideout Road.
That must be a good class bungalow.
King Soon, yes, that's a Leonowans family.
Leonowans, yeah, and the Leonowans, yeah, that's right. So the Thailand connection. Then the house is connected to the revolution in China, right? The Sun Yat-sen Villa was actually built for Teo Eng Hock's mother, right? Mother or mother-in-law, right? And the mother-in-law actually came from Bangka in Indonesia, right? So it's from one of the islands. So Bangka was settled in by quite a lot of overseas Chinese, and then of course, Teo Eng Hock's mother-in-law then came to Singapore. And when I was in Bangka, I was very shocked because you can then see the connections between a house that she was staying in Bangka. And in a town called Mentok, right? and in Singapore. So the sort of connective histories with Southeast Asia is quite mind-boggling, and we're still trying to find out more. But the purpose of these examples is really to say that I think the identities, right? I have no qualms about being a global citizen and understanding all kinds of histories. But I think it's also imperative if we are to be find other forms of identities, that also to find the Singapore identity, like, in terms of what kind of histories we have, and then also all these other economic, social, and all other kind of histories that are connected back to Southeast Asia. So that's actually my plea, and it's also continuation of my search. Thank you.
Can I have 1 minute to add to your, give me 1 minute to add to your point, which is very interesting. Now you mentioned the Mongkut connection. Tan Kim Cheng, the eldest son of Tan Tock Seng, he was in very close contact with King Mongkut, who requested Kim Cheng to search for a governess for his eldest son, King Chulalongkorn. And through the connection, because Kim Cheng was a Pang Hokkien Pang power, very powerful, has got very influential connection with the British community, the English community of Mr. Reed. The name of his name memorialized in the bridge along Clarke Quay. And then it was through that connection that Mr. Reed introduced Anna Yonowans to Tan Kim Cheng to introduce to King Mongkut.
Actually, must thank both of you for raising our awareness of the importance of understanding our history, both geographically as well as in terms of personalities and also events, Because I think the big issue that we are now going to face as we move to the next phase of Singapore's development is we have to consolidate our identity. In the past, maybe 4 decades, the identity has eroded because of the global city, and we have to look like the West. Okay, that the connection is this: creativity is not possible without identity. If you do not have confidence in yourself, you dare not be creative. So, to understand yourself, you must know your heritage, and to know your heritage, you must know your history. So this is a very important project from now on that we have to develop. So Friday Conversations, I think, will be developing a series of discussions, right, towards the future of Singapore, and identity is going to be one major part of it. We have to reconstruct, re-understand who we are, not just in Singapore, but in terms of our immediate neighbours and beyond that, right? Because Singapore is a conglomerate, historically and culturally, of a much larger area, which I think Chee Kien has alluded to, which is Southeast Asia, which includes the whole of South China, right? Which includes India, and it includes, of course, the Western influence as well. So it's an incredibly rich area, and I want to just underscore the point which I made in the book, that Ferdinand Braudel, when he wrote the 2 big volumes on the history of the Mediterranean, he described Southeast Asia as the Mediterranean of the East, and the Mediterranean of the West was the incubator for the whole Renaissance. So if we want to understand the Asian Renaissance, we have to understand ourselves. So this is the beginning. Thank you.
All right, I suppose it's time for me to. Thank you, Prof, for inviting me. It's a pleasure. And he said I'm some sort of social activist. I beg to differ. Well, I'm a social scientist, you know. So this book and this event is of high interest, and the comments of the previous panelists, because I'm trained as a historian. So I certainly look at the past as a social scientist to problematize where we are, you know, in this particular global and local moment. And then I butter my bread by being a futurist, presuming to tell different clients, governments, corporates, civil society, international organizations, what to do to be future ready, especially in the realm of food systems. So that anchors my comments. So I think first of all, I really just wanted to say that I have great regard for Prof Tay, no relation, as a polymath, you know. So think about it, you know, okay, just to be a bit cheeky, if Adolf Hitler had remained a painter, you know, or if Bashar al-Assad had remained an ophthalmologist, you know, optometrist, or if Lee Kuan Yew, for that matter, had just remained a lawyer and just made money, you know, history would have turned differently, you know. I think it's not too much puffery to say likewise for Tay Kheng Soon as an architect, you know, but really so much more than that. And I think this book that he has is really a distillation of, so much of his life's work and belief and looking ahead in that sense. And so you can really get so much out of the book. Yes, I'm plugging it. Can I have maybe 5% maybe of the proceeds? But you can either take it as a whole corpus, and I think he should, you know, in the Q&A explain the central logic to his book. Because there is one, and I encourage you to buy it, because there's a very chim portion right at the end that I'm still wrapping my brain around, this part here, and this colorful, okay, look at pages 2, 3, 5, 6 onwards. Yeah. So I think that's the hinge of his whole book, his epiphany. So we'll let him explain that maybe to those who buy the book. Yeah. All right. So I think that's number one. You know, I think there's so much there. You can mix and match. I've known Prof for a few years, and I think we sparred over many things. I don't agree with all the views there, but that's the thing. You know, there's so much there to interact with and to edify oneself. Okay, and I think number two, related to that, another person who wrote a review of the book said that it is in a way, it's an intergenerational love letter, or at least provocation manifesto. And I like the almost like ageless hipster kind of way that he formats the book and gets things across. On the one hand, it's a very quick read, but then you can sleep on it under your pillow and get so much more again with the ideas. And so, cross-generational. So I've been tasked, I think I'm a young Singaporean, which speaks to our demographic crisis. I don't feel that young, I'm in my 40s. But I do have young children, and we did our duty because we have two. You know, so let me maybe expand on what the young want. I mean, on the one hand, it's universal. It's not just Singaporean, and I think previous speakers have talked about how everything is linked to everything else, right? Be it the macroeconomy or flows of people, ideas, cultures, and so on. What do I want for my young children that I think, again, is for everyone and is universal? I think, and these also speak again to the times we are in and look ahead to where we'll be, and also some resonance of what was before, including very wrenching changes that Prof reacts to, like how Malaya got split apart, or rather we left. Okay, so number one would be safety and security. And that sounds very trite, but I think unfortunately we are in a new Cold War, and perhaps we are even closer to a hot war than we were. Back when I was conscripted in the 90s, I'm still at the tail end of my service in the military. Interesting story there as a reservist. So safety and security, that's I think a basic human aspiration, but I think that'll be more problematized. One thing that we haven't talked about enough, the book kind of skirts it, is the ecological crisis that we are in. So that's also a big threat to life and limb. And the threshold for of it is when people who are middle class and above start feeling the type of challenges that poor and vulnerable people around the world have felt all the time. So things like flood may come to you. Okay, so building on that, I think that I came up with this crude acronym of what I think would be the aspirations of what I would want for the next generation, not just my children. So CLIMB, C-L-I-M-B. I think, and this also speaks to the economy. I have different views on neoliberalism, but onto that later. So I think for number one is that we can't help but be consumers, but overconsumption has led us to this predicament. But that's also the predicament of the consumer economy, the modern economy. So how do you consume more circularly, and also as part of that co-create goods and services that you need. But then the economy will find another level if you don't have that much flowing through the formal economy. You have the maker movement and so on. So L, what's L? Labor. We all need to work hard in school, in life, but I think with AI there, let's not get on the cul-de-sac and talk about AI, but I think that they'll be laboring through innovation. So I think that we need to learn to be innovative. I think the future of education has been one key concern of Kheng Soon's. Next would be investment. Of course in the sense that we all know, but also how to invest not just your resources, but your time and talent and endowment as well. And that relates to the M part, which would be a sense of mission. And what is that? That's a whole topic in itself, as well as the B, which is belief, which is private but also corporate as well. And so then maybe at the apex of this triangle that I've drawn here, I think that part of the values and sensibility in which to execute these goals would be to have a certain cosmo-local sense of where we are as people in Singapore, in Southeast Asia, in quite a troubled and extraordinary world. So on the one hand, you want people who tend to themselves take care of their own interests, but also look after the interests of their neighbor. So what's a neighborhood? You can view that concentrically, including beyond our borders. But I think, as Roosevelt said, if your neighbor's house is on fire, you've got to help them put it out, right? Or else look at what's happening in LA, for instance. So cosmo-localism, and having that sense of history, including of the inequities, but also the unique endowment that the colonial moment has given Singapore. And that sense of history that will inform our savvy interaction and respectful interaction with our immediate neighbors, for instance. Now let me talk about government and society for a while, since it's been brought up. I don't have a strong view on what economic system we need next time, but I think that it should start first with really government and society. So if anything, in the poly-crisis we are in now, and I'm not just talking about Singapore, but I think governments around the world, will likely need to step up more, to correct market failures and to manage and avert crises as well. So you probably need a big state, But at the same time, matching it, you need a big society, such as people with the CLIMB values that I mentioned, engaging. A lot of people have visions about how they want their country to change, they want their politics to change. I think if society changes itself, eventually the government will change, either is in a leading way or in a following way, in the political market economy that we have globally. And around that, I think that government-society link responding to the needs, the aspirations of the people. Then we'll structure how we relate to enterprises. I do think that Singapore's strength would be the strong state sector if it can be run in a way that helps us ride the next wave in the region. So it comes to my last point for now, which is a sense of space and place. And of course, as an architect, you have that. I think that of course, space and place and everything. There's exteriority, interiority, but there's also the inner life, and they're all linked as well. And it's all about location, and the history that attaches to it as well. So I also like this sense of space that comes in the treatment in the book. And I think with that, I would say that one interesting development then are things that defy a sense of space, a sense of corporeality. So that will be one theme that we need to engage with moving forward. Things that are in the ether, literally, like Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, for instance. So how do you outflank this sense of space and even of time as well? So with that, thank you again, and kudos to Kheng Soon and such an excellent book.
Well, thanks very much, all three of you, for expressing your views about the future and the past. I'd like to invite actually the audience to now kind of question us what you think about what we have said. Yeah, and then afterwards, I want to ask Aldrin. Where's Aldrin? Yeah, I want to then ask Aldrin to tell us what he has in mind to take this discussion beyond into the future. Okay, so let's open the questions. Questions, please.
I don't have a questions, but I think it's more of how I feel about it. Okay, my name is Sean. Yeah. My last two jobs were deal with entertainment and films. So films is actually an integral part of our Singapore culture, but you look at globally, those films that actually made it to international are mainly directors in Chinese ethnicity, Singapore Chinese ethnicity, and I have been questioned and bombarded by a Singaporean Indian ethnicity that when I voice out that Singapore does not have too many Chinese language films. So over the years, I have seen our Singapore Chinese community has been Chinaized. Our Singapore Chinese language is now dominated by terms from China. It's a departure from terms that me as a 1980 guy grew up with Taiwan and Hong Kong terms. And our film culture, watching culture for Chinese films is China dub Hong Kong and Taiwan films. And the most money-making film is by Jack Neo, who is a Singapore Chinese ethnicity. All the other races directors, they can only make waves in film festivals in the West. So what we're looking right now, the biggest race in Singapore is at its danger being eroded by values, words and terms from China. This is a fact. You don't see our Chinese media speaking using terms from Taiwan. 视频 is from China. A lot of the terms has been simplified using China terms. So I really fearful for the fact that in future when racial relations are so brittle, all the other races will point us to us, Singaporean Chinese, say that we have been living so well because of social ties and business ties with China. And also we have this Chinese privilege. and remark for the fact for the how I feel about the Singapore Johor economic zone. Very sad fact. This will be run by parties that have relations with the properties. RNF, the most fascinating, property, right? If you look at starting from Woodlands, is a China-run property. So we have to navigate, how to deal with businesses from China in providing views on the economic zone, because the Malaysian Chinese community in Johor itself, okay, they will feel that if, let's say, anybody from China comes in, they will have a say in how to run and manage. This is my viewpoint when I interact with the Malaysian Chinese. They were given this thing. They give me this vibe. So, in order to know the other party, we have to learn their language. We have to learn their political ideas. In order actually to navigate ourselves. It's a very sad fact for our Singapore identity, but this is the truth. So, these are my comments. Thank you.
Actually, there's a recent, just quickly interject. There's a recent article written by Leslie Fong, who used to be a major journalist in Straits Times, now exiled himself to Taiwan. I think he's in Taiwan, right? Hong Kong and Taiwan, yeah, Hong Kong. And he lamented on the question of language. You say that the Chinese language is becoming kind of Chinese in terms of the word, the vocabulary. Leslie Fong made the same point about the English language, that it has become Americanized, like the term awesome, everything is awesome, right? And then the other word is cool, right? Chill, chill.
Those have become normal to us.
Battery.
No,
You press on the on-off, I think.
Clap again. Clap
Yeah,
again.
I don't know how to work this thing. It's working out, it's working out.
Yeah, so
Press
no,
light.
I think you switch it on.
No, the light, just leave the light on.
I think the battery is running out. I had to change new sets of batteries.
Hey, well, just shout out.
The light is on.
Yeah, it works, it works.
It is on.
Yeah.
I think language is a very important aspect of identity, right? And I think this underscores Chee Kien's point, right? That, and also my point in the book, that unless we develop a strong identity of ourselves, right, we will be overtaken by all the big powers in the world. Okay. One of the things which I mentioned in the book, contrary to the Chinese influence, is the opposite of that. The early Nanyang artists who came to Singapore, Chen Wen-si, Georgette Chen, all this, that whole generation, they were all super skilled in Chinese art. No? But when they came to Singapore, they came to Malaya and Singapore, they decided they want to become Malayan artists. So what did they do? They all went to Bali to draw the pictures of the women, the new women, and so on and so forth. And that's the point, you see. And there's another group that set up in the Rambutan Garden in where was it? Thompson Road, right? And they had a kind of group of artist scholars who were discussing and debating about the Malayan culture,
Okay, so that is, I think the Malayan culture is the root culture of who we are, and we've kind of lost that. So I think we need to rediscover it and find our roots, right? So in terms of Chinese language, we will be introducing a lot of Malay words into the Chinese language as well.
History of the Rambutan Club. It was owned by Han Wai Tun, a very well.
We went to search for it.
Yes, I had a privilege of going to Han Wai Tun, brought by my father, because Han Wai Tun and my father, they were great friends in Nanyang history. All right, and I go a bit further because it was Han Wai Tun that discovered Johor Lama, the ancient capital of Johor, and in 1868, Sultan, I beg your pardon, Maharaja Abu Bakar, who later became Sultan Abu Bakar, he reinvented Johor Bahru and called it Johor Bahru. Thank you.
Can I respond? Can I respond? Yeah. I left out language in my discussion because I wanted to talk more about the spatial ideas, but I think Sean knows my views quite well that we really need to think about language, and in terms of what is local language, I think as what Sean has alluded to, that it has to be something that is local, something that has developed in Singapore. And I think it's not just language, but all kinds of different aspects, and I think it affects the Singaporean Chinese especially, because how then do you differentiate what is Singaporean or Malaysian Chinese culture from other sort of cultures, right? Given that there have been sort of dynamic trends. So the biggest question, of course, is then what is sort of Nanyang Chinese, right? If you want to sort of have a sort of broader definition of it, and I would say that, you know, of course, it's the infusion of words and all that. But even with Singlish, right, which is identified to be the sort of development of lingua franca in Singapore, even for Singlish, there really needs to be periodization, right? And also what kind of Singlish was spoken at the different decades, right? Because when I was teaching students, suddenly the term "cannot make it" came about, but I don't remember the term "cannot make it" before the 1990s. CMI. Yeah. CMI. So cannot make it was also, I felt that the term "cannot make it" also represented a sort of level of psychology in students where they sort of started to judge themselves by whether it is you're successful or not. So the placement of "cannot make it" should only be used if in history after the 1990s. So this point of realization came when I was watching this MediaCorp series called Mata Mata, where they use Singlish as if it was the Singlish they use the Singlish of the current era, while portraying a 1970s Singapore where Singlish was actually not, as Singlish as now. Right? I think there is a distinction between the 1970s Singlish that was portrayed in Mata Mata as compared to the current times when you include terms like "cannot make it." Right? I mean terms that we were familiar with called like "ghostan." We never use sort of a "ghostan" anymore, right? And to be aware, right, that there is this is kind of a language thing, and in that respect, I think part of the way that the Singaporean sort of Chinese language is important is through the dialects, right? And I think there have been a lot of conversations, right, about why dialects are important, and even in the context of the bilingual program. I personally think it is time that we should bring dialects back, given that it has been weakened, it has been all that. And the reason, personal observation, is that there is a level of competitiveness for Singaporeans if they understand dialects. When I travel a bit in Hong Kong and sometimes China, and I realized that the Malaysians are actually through certain conversations they were saying that thank goodness Singapore is not having dialects, because when they are conducting business with specific groups of people in China, they can converse in the dialect. So the Hainanese merchants will converse in Hainanese, the Teochew and all that, and the level of and the speed of dialect, I've seen Singaporean Chinese spend so much time trying to conjure one sentence when the Malaysians can already sort of tell you a whole story and add jokes, jokes included in the dialogue. So I think it's very important, and I think going back to film, a recent film that has become very important in looking at the idea of dialects is this Hong Kong film called The Last Dance, right? 破地狱. And it is important because the story tells of a funeral director that has a sort of Taoist priest, and the point of contact, and so it was kind of a how many of you have seen The Last Dance in Cantonese? Because it's not as effective if you watch it in the Chinese version. In the Cantonese version, right, the funeral director who wanted to have modern ideas and so on and so forth, right, having souvenirs during funerals and things like that, comes into contact with a Taoist priest who are very set on old ideas, and finally they were able to communicate when they sat down at a cafe and started to remember this musical form called Nanyang, which is the music of the Central Plains that subsequently was traveled to Taiwan, to southern China, and then of course it is also practiced in Singapore. So this Nanyang has been sort of replaced. In China it is supposed to be Guoyue, right, which is the different form of music that is no longer in China but practiced by that. But coming back to the movie, the point of connection was when they started to sing in this common language a particular song, right, and with a particular nuance and all that then finally allowed both sides to accept each other, right? The traditional Taoist priests accepting new ideas, and of course the sort of modern day funeral director understanding more of what tradition actually means. So this film unfortunately had only a few screenings in Cantonese, and I think a lot of the nuance was lost. I think it was actually very powerful because dialect is no longer just a form of communication, but it has sort of a deeper levels and of culture, of musical history and all that can allow communication across different generations, but also to mutually understand certain forms of cultural meanings and amongst themselves. So I would really think that even though there's a loss of capacity, we really should bring back dialects for the Chinese community in Singapore. Just on that.
On that point, my former partner who passed away, who is a Chinese scholar, told me that the Tang poetry from the Tang dynasty period, the Tang poetry, right, when read in conventional Mandarin sounds terrible. But if read in Hokkien, it's incredibly beautiful. So I think this is something that we got to understand the power of language, And when we talk about English, I quoted this poem by Edwin Tambu, which I like to read one short paragraph about his because Edwin Tanggu was writing at the time when Singapore and Malaya were breaking away from the British colonial power, you know. So he says, the bitter curving tide of history, see well enough, relinquish, restore this place, this sun to us, restore this place, this sun to us, and the waiting generations. Depart, white man.
Alright, Kheng Soon, on that note, it's 5:30 now. Any more questions?
I just wanted to comment a few things. Number one, Malaya itself is a small petri dish, very exposed. Singapore is even smaller petri dish, very exposed. If you're trying to culture something there, inevitably it's prone to a lot of influence. So I think that the issue here is that everyone has their preferred influence and less preferred influence. But I think it's important to be mindful of all influences and manage it as a role for society, as a role for governance as well. And I think the second point is that I think the gentleman spoke of the halcyon days of the 80s. I think Sing Yao and all that. And I think Prof also maybe anchored in his youth as well in Malaya. So I think it'll be our generation sang 3 national anthems, right? Yeah. So and again, as a historian, I try to appeal at that, empathize with that. So I think it's also an eternal truth that people, I guess, unless you grew up in very traumatic circumstances in your youth, tend to have that halo effect on when you were young as the good times. I mean, me too. Again, I'm not that young anymore. And I think that lastly on that note, I commend to you a tract written by S. Rajaratnam. I think he was quite prescient. He alluded to the global city. Yeah, I don't think he coined that, but he wrote a tract. He wrote a speech on Singapore, the global city, and I think it was right for its time, but it's quite eternal because his first point was that let's leapfrog the neighborhood by plugging into the global economy to get our lunch. But his second, more reflective point was that we can do well doing that, but the greatest challenge will be on the cultural and spiritual side of things in terms of managing that. Okay. And very last point, I think in struggling with Mandarin, I think I'm an ACS boy like Professor, so there's certain culture of Mandarin in school. But I think they still speak different languages as well. So we have English, we have Malay as well. I'm Baba on one side of my family. So that can also help as a ballast, against people whose main language Urdu or Beijing Mandarin or whatever, Yankee talk or what. So one good example of being anchored at a certain time would be, so all these Americanisms come in. I studied in the US, but I mean it's because you learned the Queen's English last time. That's why it's more incongruous when all these new things come in. So life is changed in that sense.
So shall we close up and
We
have until 6 o'clock, right?
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We have until 6. So,
I got a question.
I thought we'll do some interactions and
yeah, let's have a few more interactions and before Elgin.
Actually, I want to build on the language because it's not just language that defines us, our identity. It's also race. And I want to talk about the CMIO model. The CMIO model is outdated to me. It's a British invention, and to me, it's a political tool. So I'd like to hear the speakers' comments on the CMIO model, especially I think Jay, who talked about this last night about your wife being Indonesian. My wife is also Indonesian. So if we had children, right?
We have children, so
my
son is the others now. So how do you qualify me? Am I an Indian household or Indonesian household or a mixed household, right? So I think this whole thing needs to be reconstructed.
You are other.
Yeah, I'm the alien among the in the jungle, right? No, but before you answer, I'd like to add to something else was mentioned on the same forum. Which was
there was a NUS Associate Professor of Sociology, Daniel Goh. He mentioned that the Singapore population cannot be identified by just being born and bred here, but it's actually a sense of emotion. So how do you link that to when you said we must have identity, and to understand identity, you must have heritage, and also understand your history. So how would you link the two state of mind? Because you guys are saying we must have an identity, and then people in a bit of authority are saying no, it's a sense of emotion because there is an influx of foreigners coming in, and we need to integrate. So they're trying to psychoanalyze how we should be loyal to our own country. How would you take that?
Answer that yourself.
I think they came to listen to you.
No, I think this is for overall discussion. What are your thoughts about identity in Singapore? What kind of identity should we have in Singapore? Go ahead.
Well, personally, I feel that the CMIO model is outdated, and we should really look into it, because I teach in schools. When you go to schools, there's a good 10 to 20% of kids who are mixed race already. And so this is going to be what it is going to be in the next 15 to 20 years. So we have to start looking at it now. I'm surprised they are actually having the forum without even having a solution to the CMIO model. And so I don't know what they were trying to pull, but I think the main scoop was to make people think that you should have the integration set in our minds already as local born and bred people. And the thing is, there is an emotional attachment, but emotional attachment comes with the patriotism and the fact that we have been responsible, or our forefathers have been responsible for what Singapore is today with the early visionaries. So the emotional attachment comes from the fact of the sense of belonging. So for them to turn around and say, we bring in new citizens, no disrespect to them, they are needed here, but to say we can use that as the first step to integrate, because it's all a matter of emotion. You put everybody in a football game between us and a person coming in, he might wear our jersey, but he'll be secretly be happy if his own home team scores, right? So where is that coming from? You ask any refugee in any border, in any country, you can ask them, do you love this country? They say, I love this country, not because he's emotionally attached, but it's an economical attachment.
It has to have a lot of pictures and words and many different colors and so on. But that is very different from the typical kind of book printed in the West, okay? Which has got blocks of text, right? Composed with empty spaces in between, very artistically composed and so on. So I said, no, that's not what I want to do. So I asked myself, what do I want to do? Then I came up with a very simple thing, no? Why is it that I love rojak? Why is it that I love chincalo?
Which I think is a very good point.
Why do I love belacan? This is really at the crux of it. That's what I am. That is what we are. That's why our China people cannot tahan our food. You see? And the Angmos cannot tahan our rojak. Because our rojak got heko. You see? And what is that taste? That taste, the only word that comes close to it is umami, which is a Japanese word, right? So this is at the deep level, no? It's not just an intellectual thing, it is at the taste buds, That's so fundamental, right? So when you go and eat, what they call it, French fries, it doesn't satisfy. I want to eat French fries
with sambal belacan.
I think to add on to identity part, because I used to be the expatriate in Cambodia. I worked for a government-run casino, government license-run casino, to be in fact, in Cambodia. For all that years over there, right, my taste of home is actually the Hainanese chicken rice in Phnom Penh. And at one point of time, I was so disappointed with the hawker food because it tastes so bland. Because I came from a family who runs restaurant. We used to run F&B enterprise before the 1970s. So whenever I miss home, right, I will go down to the Hainanese chicken rice, and being said this is part of Singapore. And yet when I actually deal relations with the local Khmer, the Cambodians, we call it the Khmers, the Singapore mindset had a roadblock because the Khmer people, right, whether are they the Khmer, the Khmer Teochews, the Khmer Cham, okay, but when they work and think they united as one. That got to do with the history part, where Singapore plays a part in establishing peace of Cambodia from 1979 to 1991. So, we try to make things work, but yet at the same time, we as a Singaporeans, right, when we do businesses, for my view, when we do relations with the local Khmer employees, with the local Khmer business people, we have always had a roadblock. We will have this anxiety. It's because that we do not know the history of Singapore and Cambodia in general. We had this anxiety. For example, the Cambodian public holidays is, before the change of constitution amendment, is 31 days. Public holidays, and that includes the Genocidal Day and also the vengeance against the Vietnamese and the Pol Pot. So with so many days, right, then we find that how are we going to do businesses? But as time goes by, I talk to some of the Cambodian businessmen, Singaporeans, right? They know how to deal with it. I think that's the part for us Singaporeans that we need to go out to Cambodia, or places like Cambodia, then we are able to bring out this resilient part.
I think your point is quite simple, that if you want to be effective
in wherever you are, you need to understand the culture of the place that you go to, and you also have to, in a sense, also know your own culture, because you want to know that you have to understand the difference, right? So I think the future of Singapore's economy in relation to the region, which will include Cambodia and so on, much bigger area, right, will mean that we need to understand the region a lot more, right? And I think we have been too much of a little red dot, right? So I think we need to be much bigger than a red dot.
My name is Peter, I'm from Switzerland. I would like to comment a bit about the stakeholdership or something. When I talk with my Singaporean friends, they all say, they have nothing to say, they are not involved, things happen without their influence. That's why I would like to recommend for Singapore to introduce direct democracy, how we have in Switzerland. In Switzerland, 100,000 people can sign a paper and propose a new law, or if the parliament makes a decision we don't like, we can collect 100,000 signatures, and then the people have the final word. And the advantage is, if the people decide, you have a public discussion. The people don't always make the right decision, sometimes it's wrong. When I was a boy, women were not allowed to vote, only men could vote. And then there was the voting, should women be allowed? And the men said no. And then a few years later, the voting came again and again till the right decision was taken. But the advantage is that then everybody is discussing it together, and it's a common decision. It's not the government who says, okay, we have to change, we go with the times and now we change something. It comes from the people. And what I heard why it's not done in Singapore is because they say Singapore people are not ready for it, they are not educated enough for something. Which I feel is funny, because it's the most, Singaporean are the most highly educated people in the world, I guess. And like Switzerland, Singapore is small, Switzerland is like 8 million, you have I think around some 6 million. So it would be a perfect system which would really work well in Singapore.
In fact, in my book, in the book,
in the book, I actually copied inspired by the Swiss canton system. Right, in the book, I propose that the 5 CDCs in Singapore, right, should become 5 local governments, that they elect their own leaders, okay, and the mayor is elected, not selected, as it is now, and then each of the 5 constituencies will have their own housing board, their own planning department, their own Ministry of Education, and let them compete with each other instead of one system, right? So on every issue, let the people there should be referendums, right? In Switzerland, you have, in each canton, maybe 4 referendums per year on important issues. This is local democracy or direct democracy. That is how we bring the most educated people to a higher level of courage. Right now, they are very smart, but no balls, okay? So I think this is the future. The future of Singaporean is to use your intelligence with courage and innovation. That's our future. So on that point, I want to pass the meeting to Aldrin to tell us what he wants us to do in the future. In the book, I actually copied inspired by the Swiss canton system. Right, in the book, I propose that the 5 CDCs in Singapore, right, should become 5 local governments, and they elect their own leaders, okay, and the mayor is elected, not selected, as it is now, and then each of the 5 constituencies will have their own housing board, their own planning department, their own Ministry of Education, and let them compete with each other instead of one system, right? So on every issue, let the people there should be referendums, right? In Switzerland, you have, in each canton, maybe 4 referendums per year on important issues. This is local democracy or direct democracy. That is how we bring the most educated people to a higher level of courage. Right now, they are very smart, but no balls, okay? So I think this is the future. The future of Singaporean is to use your intelligence with courage and innovation. That's our future. So on that point, I want to pass the meeting to Aldrin to tell us what he wants us to do in the future.
Okay. Thank you, Prof Tay, and thank you, speakers. Okay, so Friday Conversations, we are a public education platform. We are a ground up, and we really want to take the ideas and the conversations further. Okay, so I got some homework because this is education. So some homework for everybody. So number 1, we just about to launch a website. CS, who is part of our team, has painstakingly set up a website called thefridayconversations.com, thefridayconversations.com. So please go there, have a look. It's still work in progress. If you would like to volunteer to help us, please do so. Because again, we are completely non-profit, no money. We are all volunteers, so we welcome you to join us. And the second piece of homework is that this conversation will continue. So from February onwards, on a monthly basis, we hope to have a monthly conversation online where we will dive deeper into the various themes that's discussed in the book, so that we can understand a bit more about the thought processes, right, and where we are going with these ideas that we are sharing today. And we will also have physical meetups, so that we can again have a more in-depth discussion. So please look out for these details, right, in the website or with Prof Tay's Facebook page, because they'll be updated. Also, Prof Tay mentioned earlier about space, which we want to discuss about possibly bringing people together to discuss about the future of the SEZ. And I think it's very important for us to start talking about things we can do, rather than just postulate and having coffee shop talks. So again, look out for space as well. And later on, before you go, please go to the QR code. There's a QR code there. Please also sign up there. We will also share with you the links to the website. And we also have a WhatsApp group page. Join us, we will update there. And I know later Huni also will set up a Facebook page. So we really hope that everybody will join us in these events, right? And yes. It's there. Okay, so when you sign up over there, we will definitely have information. And again, the books are for sale, $30. Please come here later to this handsome gentleman. He takes all sorts of currencies, right? You can cook and clean too, I think, right?
Bitcoin included.
Okay, so please support. Again, it's non-profit. You will go into supporting the project further. And lastly, I also want to give a special thanks to Chunon, the person who put everything together, right? And the speakers as well. Thank you for coming in and sharing us with your expertise. We hope we can have more conversations as well, right? As part of our program moving forward, right? So, and again, thank you everybody, right, for coming. Let me pass the mic back.
I don't know what to say.
Buy my book.
Well, let's just mill around and have a chat with each other, get to know each other. I think it's been a wonderful mix of people. Some many old friends and also many new friends. Thank you all very much.